Hi everyone. We're going to continue on with making the rabbit for the Alice in Wonderland cake. So here I have the torso that I had made earlier, and he's pretty well set. What I have done is I put in some 26 or 24 gauge wire in here, and it's just like an inch. I just cut an inch in length, and this is what we're going to put the feet on so they kind of adhere nicely. But he's pretty well solid. But before we move on to the foot, I want to start on the arms because I want to kind of have the arms rest a little bit before I place them on him. So I'm not going to wait until they dry completely, but I do want them to be a little bit solid. So each arm is going to be about 1/8 of an ounce, or if you want to measure in grams, it'll be about 2 ounces per, 2 grams per arm. So we have 2 little chunks here. I would say you can go 2 to 3 grams per arm. And like I said before, it's very important to do your arms, legs, ears, feet, whatever, the same time so you can gauge that they are following the same size. So I want them to be about, I would say, 1 1/4 inch long. And a 1/2 inch, about a 1/2 inch thick. And I'm just going to flatten. If they're a little bit shorter, that's fine too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little tool and I'm just going to make a crease so that it bends a little bit. And then I'm just going to kind of flatten this part. This is going to go against his body. So, and we're going to do the same thing to the opposite direction as well. So it's going to be, you just follow the same steps. If you find that the more you work with it, the more it loses its shape, just adjust a little bit. It should be fine. Okay, so at this point, they kind of look like sleeves of a coat, because that's basically what his coat is the red fondant. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is once I get the rest of his coat on, I'm going to insert 2 more pieces of 26 or 24 gauge wire in there, and they will go into the arms to help to adhere to his body. So we're going to set these aside. So now we're going to start working on his feet. So his foot, I would say, is about 6 grams. I have a pre-done foot. This is very dry. It's been done for actually a couple weeks now. And I will have that template for you in your packet. So each foot, I would say maybe 3 grams of white fondant. So I'm going to start at a not a pointy teardrop. You don't want the point, you don't want the end of it too pointy. And you want this foot to be around, excuse me, an inch. Okay, and then I'm going to just press down a little bit. I'm going to flatten this. And I'm just going to compare. And I think that looks pretty good. And then you're going to take this tool and you're just going to make marks. You're going to press that in for his 3 toes, okay? And then what we're gonna do is, I kind of want to see where I want that foot to be. So I think that's good. Okay, so, and if he's poking out a little bit, that's fine. As long as I want him to eventually stand up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to just add a little bit of water there. Okay, and then he'll just make sure that his feet are nicely attached to his body. And I'm just going to rest him up right here. Against my little piece of styro. And as he's doing that, I'm going to work on his vest. Now the vest is just yellow fondant mixed with Tylose. It's not really a certain weight because you're going to be rolling it out. Okay, so here we have a piece of fondant that is 4 by 1. Just trim off. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet this area around. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you want his body to be placed halfway onto the fondant. So you're going to roll that around. And it doesn't matter if it's lining up just fine. If it doesn't, that's okay. It's the back of him. No one's going to see the back at this point. Okay, so then what you want to do is you're going to find his middle. And I'm just going to make a mark. I'm going to cut off a little triangle. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to cut this part. Just make sure you don't cut yourself. And this is going to act as his collar. So you can just open that up. At this point, I'm going to set him aside. And what I also want to do is you want to put an 18 gauge wire into his body. And this is going to make sure that his head is securely attached as well. Okay, you want it sticking out. So his head's going to go in here. Okay, I'm going to set him aside. And then you can also, if you want, you can make a little button with that yellow. all you need is just a little itty bitty dot. Wet that. And then place it. Okay. So then let's move on to his coat. His coat is basically the same size as his vest. So you might find yourself trimming, and that's fine too. Okay, so then we want to be able to wrap his coat underneath his collar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wet this area. Okay. And then I want to start basically his coat from the point that I want it to be. So I want it to be a little bit away from the center here. So I'm just going to wrap that around. And I'm going to need to trim because definitely there's a little bit more space there. So I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and just cut that away. And then I'm going to make his collar, and his collar is just a very thin piece of red. So I'm going to start the collar at maybe 3.5 inches. And I'm just kind of gauging as to what size I want. This might be like 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna wet this top part it's just going to go around. And I'm just going to trim. And then I'm just going to open his coat a little bit. Now you can, I don't have a scissors around, but I would normally trim that piece off. So that's the start of his coat and his vest. So now we're gonna move on to making his bow tie. And you just need a little bit of purple. So then you're going to take just 2 little balls and make them into teardrops. And then you're just going to press them down. So they kind of look like little kernels, I guess. And then what you can do is cut them with an X-Acto knife. Make sure they're a little bit pointy. You can also roll it out and cut it yourself in a triangle shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these little guys here. And then I'm just going to make a little center. So I'm just rolling out a little sausage piece. And I'm just cutting it down. This is not a particular size. I'm just eyeballing it. And I'm just going to adjust there. Make 2 little creases. Okay, so kind of has a little poofy bow, but that's okay. So there are plenty of other ways to do it. You can use something like this and then just cut it down, and that is easy as well. So now let's move on to attaching his arms. So I want to decide where I'm going to put his arms at. So I think I'm going to put them maybe in the center right here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick this piece in here. And it might be a little tough just because he is pretty solid. And then I'm going to take the other arm and kind of do the same thing. So I made a little indentation, kind of just pressing that arm again so I can figure out where I'm sticking that piece of wire. And you also want to kind of make sure that the wire is sticking out a little bit forward. Okay, so I'm going to wet the side that is going to be on the actual body, just so it's going to adhere a little bit better. Oh, I did the wrong side. So you want to make sure that the crease is facing the same direction. So you want to establish what is your left arm and what's your right arm. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this little tool and just kind of press against the body so it kind of adheres better. And his feet want to come off too. But those can be put back on if that should happen. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of bend his arms a bit, and I'm going to put his foot back on both his feet. So I have him sitting here. I'm just going to let him just kind of rest. Okay, so after this, we're going to go over his head and his hands. I want to have these arms fairly dry before I put his hands on. Because the hands I find to be a little bit tricky. I don't know why. I wish they were a little bit more easier, but for whatever reason, I think because they are so tiny, that they're a little difficult. All right, so we will be right back. We'll start working on the head.